So go. Welcome back, friends, again to Chapter 4 of Mad Bear. One is the human spirit. The native people can help and give great power when it comes to enhancing the unity of minds. This is our gift. I arrived in New York City nearly 2 weeks before United Nations Day and reserved a couple of rooms in the Lexington Hotel near Grand Central Station. Well, we may need more rooms than that, Mad Bear told me on the phone. Beeman can stay with me, but then there'll be a few more people. I'm bringing a man from Six Nations Reserve up Canada side. You can meet him when we get there. And then you know that Anyas? That young fellow, I showed you his picture. He'll be coming down as our helper. We need an assistant, when we carry our medicine. And what about RT? Did you get a room for him or no? I've talked with Rolling Thunder since we were out in Tucson, and he and Spotted Fawn are definitely coming. But they'll be bringing Grandfather David and I think a few of their own people. I didn't know what arrangements to make for them. Look, you better line up at least half a dozen rooms over there, just to be on the safe side. I'd like to try and have all our native people together, you know what I mean? Right there in the same place. I lined up the half a dozen rooms just to see requested. "You didn't need to come all the way here to meet us," Mad Bear said, as soon as his smiling face appeared through the gate at LaGuardia Airport. "I know my way all over this whole city. I can get from anywhere to anywhere, though I don't particularly enjoy it, to tell you the truth." "But you like to brag about it, is it?" Beeman chuckled, and then he grinned at me as though expecting my greeting. "How are you?" I said, shaking his hand. "It's good to see you again." "Yep," he answered simply. They introduced me to the others. 3 of our relations from up north, as Mad Bear put it. Anyas I had recognized from his picture. Then there was Alex from Six Nations, who was perhaps nearly Mad Bear's age and a somewhat younger man they called Crow. "Sorry we were delayed coming out," Mad Bear said. "We had to get our outfits in shape, and our medicine. And Anyas here, he's kind of a guard for our medicine and whatnot, so we had to complete some ceremonies so he could handle his duties." "Let's get out of these crowds," Beeman said. "It's like a 3-ring circle in this place." "3-ring circle, is it?" Mad Bear grinned. "Well, like they say, you ain't seen nothing yet." "Do you have any other luggage?" "No, that's why we packed up these carry-on bags, so we could walk right on out of here." I had marveled more than once at Mad Bear's ability to get his books, papers, toiletries, several changes of clothes, and his full native regalia, including his Haudenosaunee hat and feathers, all into one medium-sized satchel. It seemed all the others had done the same. It made sense, since there were a number of us, to take a taxi rather than the airport bus, and we waited at the curb for a checker cab with fold-down seats so that the 6 of us could ride together. Mad Bear sat up front. He had a hard time getting in and out of a back seat, and he needed more room than any 2 of us. "Toity-toid and toid," he called out in a loud voice as we pulled away from the curb. "Right," said the driver. Mad Bear laughed and slapped his forehead. No, just kidding. We're going to the Lexington Hotel. What street's that at, Doug?" "I know where it's at," the driver exclaimed, "and it's not 3rd Avenue, it's 4th. Lexington Avenue's 4th Avenue." You're right," Mad Bear allowed, still chuckling. "You are quitely right at that." "I know I'm right," said the driver. "I ain't driving cab no 15 years for nothing here." "Why you talking funny, Bear?" Beeman asked in a serious tone. "We're supposed to look like we're from Brooklyn," Mad Bear whispered, "so don't go and spoil it." "Whereabouts you people really from?" the driver wondered. "Australia," Mad Bear replied, "but we're really trying to keep it secret. We're some of those mysterious aborigines you might have heard about." He turned around and winked at me, holding his hand over his mouth. "Do you think you can keep it under your hat?" "Yeah, why not?" said the driver. "Who am I gonna tell?" We had signed in at the front desk and showed Mad Bear and Beeman to their room. "When do we eat?" Anyas asked. "Eat?" Mad Bear exclaimed. "How can you think of food at a time like this?" "That don't sound like you, Bear," Beeman remarked. "But don't worry about food," he assured Anyas. "We won't be passing up any meals as long as Bear is around. Fact, We'll probably get in a few extra here and there. Look, give us a few minutes to wash up and change clothes, Mad Bear suggested. Like 20-30 minutes. Then just come back and knock on our door. But Anyas and I had barely settled in our room when the phone rang. Hey, what do you think of this? I figured out how to work this thing. Anytime I want to contact you guys, I just call you direct. Room to room, right over the phone. Just like uptown, isn't it? Anyways, come on over. We're sitting here waiting for you. They were sitting in their room with their door wide open and their window raised, and Mad Bear was dressed in his full, complete, traditional regalia. Don't close the door, he said. I need the air in here. Bear, what are you all dressed up for now? Anyas wondered. Well, I put this on to straighten it out. It was kind of mashed up in my bag. It'll straighten right out on me here, and then I'll hang it up. Where are the others? That's right, they're in their own room. I gotta ring them separate. Hey, Beeman, you want to try this room-to-room telephone system? No, Bear, I don't want to try it out. Just then, the other two showed up at the door. Hey, Bear, what you doing with your costume on? We're going to have another ceremony or something? Look, I'm just trying to get this thing in shape. Come on in here and have a seat, and leave the door open. Shape? That's a good one, he chuckled. What kind of shape you hoping for, Bear? Looks like you're stuck with the shape you got. Well, you did all right here, Doug, Mad Bear went on. These 3 rooms are just the ticket for the 6 of us. And then RT and them, they'll have those others. But we're going to need more, you know. There's more coming. We're going to need more money somehow, I started. This is all going to... I want to reserve a room for this young woman. This Haudenosaunee woman we're bringing down. She's a dreamer, and she sees a lot. She kinda helps us in that way, and we need her around at all times like this. Her name's Sandy. It'll be Sandy and her little boy, because he'll have to come with her. See, it'll all work out, even the money part. We'll just occupy all these rooms and somehow it'll have to all work out, right? In our meeting that evening, I learned more about how Beeman Logan had been contacted by one of the people who was helping with the coordinating of this spiritual summit. Beeman had contacted Mad Bear, and Mad Bear had contacted me and several others, including some of his own people. Through me, he had gotten in touch with Rolling Thunder, and Rolling Thunder had contacted Grandfather David. I got the impression, in hearing how all this unfolded, that it was this well-known Sufi leader, Pierre Villiat, who had initiated the fair. The man who had contacted Beeman had been in touch with him before on some other occasion, and now one of his daughters was a participant in Pierre Villiat's cosmic dance, which they were preparing to perform at this conference. I recalled how Mad Bear had described the 4 previous spiritual summits when he had contacted me out in Tucson. He had told me about the recognized 5 major religions of the world and the increasing importance of mutual understanding and communication among them. By some sort of general and mutual reckoning, there were said to be 5 major religions on the earth: Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, and Mohammedanism. The sacred way of the native people of this hemisphere was a theology in its own right, I knew, as ancient and vast and major as any other. But it was indeed something other than any of these other 5 religions. It was good, it seemed to me, and right, that the native tribes of the world should begin to be recognized by the world at large through an event such as this. It was more than a matter of civil rights and charity, more, even, than the survival of a race and a culture. It was a matter of the sharing of primary and fundamental experience and knowledge for the benefit of the planet. I also learned, on this night, that Beeman and Mad Bear had spoken with organizers and had arranged to offer an opening prayer and blessing on the first of the 3 days of the events to be held at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, prior to the official United Nations reception on UN Day. It's only right that it be done this way, Mad Bear said, and it'll mean a lot to the power of this occasion. The native people can help a lot in this way, and give great power and potential to all the rest, especially when it comes to enhancing the gathering together and the unity of minds of the various different people. This is our gift. This can be our offering if we would be used and acknowledged for it. it is especially important for this spiritual summit that we do it as it should be done. The Native Americans are the hosts of this land, and the Haudenosaunee are the keepers of this northeastern gate. It has always been our place to welcome others from the four directions and from across the great waters, to welcome visitors to this land and give them our blessings. That's the way it was meant to be, and still is meant to be. Yep, Beeman said, nodding his head. That's our sacred instructions, and we're willing and able to be the unifying people. The very first organized unification of sovereign states originated here with the Haudenosaunee people. And the United Nations headquarters stands to this day on the ancestral land of the Haudenosaunee. And that's not by chance neither. That's the way it was meant to be. So we have to carry out our offering and welcoming, and we have to get hold of some container or some vessel so we can have our sacred fire. However small it might be, right up there on the stage, right there in the gathering place. That's right, Mad Bear agreed. We'll take a look into that first thing tomorrow, and it'll be taken care of. On the following morning, Rolling Thunder arrived with Grandfather David Montague, Spotted Fawn, and several others. Later, 2 more elders from Hopi Land arrived, Thomas Banyanka, and a man called Harold, who Mad Bear told me was a member of the One Horn Society and a custodian of records and prophecies. Then came some more of Mad Bear's friends, a few of his younger Haudenosaunee relations. By the first day of the week of the events leading up to the United Nations Day, I had rented a dozen rooms, and nearly twice that many natives walked in and out through the lobby in their colorful regalia. The 3-day program of performances, speeches, and panel discussions began with the Native American blessing offered on the stage of the giant hall of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine by the Haudenosaunee delegation. On the platform stood Chief Beeman Logan of the Onondaga Nation, Mad Bear of the Tuscarora, Alex Jameson of the Mohawk, Anyas Smoke of the Seneca, and others. The ceremonial fire burned in an old-fashioned cast-iron cauldron, partially rusted with age. Beeman Logan spoke in his native tongue, and only a few of the hundreds attending could have understood what he said. But this was not a speech or a performance. It was a prayer, a communication to the Great Spirit. After the Haudenosaunee ceremony, I sat with Mad Bear and Beeman among the Native American delegation. What followed was a performance by an all-female koto orchestra from Japan. 12 middle-aged women marched up to the platform carrying their kotos like trays in front of them, and sat on their knees in 3 neat rows. They sat stone still until the hall was completely quiet, and then bowed in unison and began to play. It sounded as though 12 people were playing one koto, or rather, as though one person were playing 12 kotos. They were 12 ladies with 12 white gowns, 12 instruments, and 1 mind. Anyas, who was sitting directly in front of me, turned around in his chair as they filed off the stage. "What kind of music did you say that was?" "Well, it's Japanese. Those instruments were kotos." "I mean, what's the name of the music?" "I don't know. It's traditional Japanese koto music. Probably quite ancient." "I'd like to get some records of that stuff. It sounds good. Like some of our own traditional music in some way." The 12 ladies stood and filed off the stage with elegant grace and precision. Then, with only a little shuffling and rearranging, there appeared before us a panel of 5 speakers, seated in a row behind a long table with several microphones. These were also from Japan, mostly monks, it appeared to me. One appeared to be a Zen monk in gray and black robes with a very broad, bald head and a gentle face. Then there were 2 others from perhaps different Buddhist orders, though they wore somewhat similar robes. These 3 spoke in turn in English, giving greetings from themselves and from all whom they represented, offering words of encouragement and unity, and making some humbly stated generalities about the commonalities in both essence and purpose of all the world's religions. The 4th man said nothing at all. He only turned to look at the small person in the business suit, sitting somewhat stiffly at the end of the table. This last man's head was not shaved like a monk, but he was nearly bald anyway. He wore glasses that made him look strict and old-fashioned. His speaking seemed old-fashioned too, at least to me, and not very impressive. He spoke Japanese in a manner with which I had become familiar in my many years in Asia. It sounded like the slow, formal, old-fashioned form of speech with lots of throaty ahs and ahms. The man on his right was his interpreter, and he repeated each sentence in English, one at a time, carefully including a representative number of ahs and ahms. The interpreter looked a little younger and a little larger, and he had a little more hair. But he also wore a business suit, and he spoke in the same slow, halting manner. Mad Bear was impressed and stuck an elbow gently in my ribs. "That man with the glasses up there, that's a very powerful man. I mean, he's got real power. Real power. Can you see his serpents?" "Serpents?" I asked. "That man has serpents about his head. Don't you see? You should try and see, because you might be getting close to seeing these things." Sometimes in these instances, I wanted so badly to see what Mad Bear saw that it was almost a temptation not to admit the truth. But I told him I could see nothing of what he was describing. It was not that I wanted to impress either him or myself, I just wanted to share in the experience. "Well, it's a rare thing to see a man like that one. He has serpents going all around his head. Boy, I get a strong sense of his power and his connections. And I would sure like to talk with him. Sometime we'll get the chance, you'll watch. We'll get a chance to meet that man." That evening, when we returned to the hotel, we found Sandy and her little boy waiting for us in the lobby. I wondered how she had known to come here. Mad Bear had told me that there was no phone on her reservation home, and that they would have to get a message to her. There had not been time for mail to reach her, and even if they had managed to somehow send a call, how did she know how to find this hotel? As always, it was pointless to press the question. We procured yet another room for Sandy and her 3-year-old son as soon as they were checked in, and we gathered once again in Mad Bear and Beeman's room. The Haudenosaunee contingency had grown. Mad Bear sat in the largest chair in front of the open window, and Beeman sat beside him. Alex, Crow, and I sat in chairs we brought from our rooms, and Anyas and the other young people sat cross-legged on the beds and wherever they could find a space on the floor. Bundy, Sandy's little boy, sat on the floor just in front of his mother, looking serious, and he neither moved nor made a sound. Mad Bear lit his pipe and leaned back, and Sandy set her mind to work. She described the events that had taken place at the cathedral as though she had been there, adding her own comments and interpretations, giving her in-depth perceptions of the people who had spoken and various other people who had been there. Then she offered some insights regarding events to come. Mad Bear and Beeman began to ask questions about these events, about what was expected of them, and what might be expected from the other delegations. She responded to each question without hesitation, either giving a direct answer or promising to supply the requested information after looking into it. "Are you a medicine woman?" asked one teenage boy who was sitting on the floor. "I wouldn't say I'm a medicine woman," she responded, "at least not until I pass the age of 70. Then I might say it." Over the days that followed, Sandy did not go to the cathedral with the rest of us, at least not in any manner that I could observe. Yet, every evening when we returned, she related her many observations regarding that day, just as though she had been there with us. The first day of the program was filled with speaking presentations. Sometimes the speakers sat in panels, but mostly they presented alone. There was a spectacular display of rabbis, priests, nuns, monks, and swamis moving about in this enormous cathedral, all in their exuberant robes and regalia. The Dalai Lama had been invited to attend, but there had been objection on the part of the official Chinese delegation to the United Nations, or so it was speculated. But there were other Tibetan monks and lamas here. Margaret Mead and Jean Houston were co-chairpersons for the event, and they had both spoken at the opening night reception. There was a compassionate and moving presentation by Mother Teresa. There were an impressive-looking spiritual leaders who were not familiar to me, but who were obviously people of great note and authority. All of the Native American delegates walked about in their full regalia and seemed to generate considerable attention and curiosity. Perhaps it was partly that, until this date, there had been little Native American presence in such global occasions. But it may also have been that these religious people knew something of the oppressive atrocities committed onto Native Americans over the centuries of history in the name of religion. Most of the speakers, though many were from distant places and no doubt little involved with the cultural affairs of our country, tendered very pointed recognition of the Native American delegation, often saying something like, "We are all very pleased to finally acknowledge this great and ancient people and culture as a major world religion." As the program unfolded, the participants formed various groups concerned with specific tasks or issues, and I had more opportunity to browse around and talk with people. The Summit Conference created the Plenary Committee for the Spiritual Advisory Council to the United Nations, and Madbear was selected to be the Native American representative to this committee. Except for our comings and goings, or when we were back at the hotel, he was often out of sight. It had become my cause, or perhaps it was my job, to involve myself with the financial concerns of the Native American contingency, and I appreciated having the time to do it. I also enjoyed talking with Alex Jameson, an Haudenosaunee colleague of Madbear's from the Six Nations Reserve in Canada. As our conversations became more interesting to him, he increasingly pursued them, and we often sat together for meals or walked together around the cathedral. He wanted to talk about the sacred objects and the deities of distant cultures, and about yoga, meditation, and karma. He was a quiet and gentle person, full of questions and full of listening, but I knew he possessed an awareness and a caring that was itself an offering and a teaching. Once Alex and I climbed the long stairway to the front entrance of the cathedral to find a group of people standing at the top of the stairs gathered around two young men from India dressed in white. They carried the fly whisks and wore the face masks over their mouth that typified their particular sect. They were Jain monks. Someone had apparently stopped them as they were about to enter the cathedral to ask them about ahimsa, a principal Jain doctrine. The onlookers appeared to be local people attending the conference, most of them college age, and there was a man in a large black hat standing slightly aside and listening with a frown on his face. We had seen him before inside the cathedral, several times trying to interrupt the program. He looked native. "Do you know this man?" I whispered. Alex shook his head. "It means harmlessness, you see," proclaimed one monk in a rather loud voice. "We are dedicated to striving for that. That is the only perfection one can achieve." "It must be difficult for you in a city like this," someone said. "I don't know how much you've seen here. There's a lot of violence." "Yes, we know, but, you see, it is pointless. Achieving nothing," said the other. "Violence only begets more violence. We believe in a goal of absolute non-violence." Suddenly, the man in the black hat sprang toward them in a threatening manner. "Hey!" he shouted. "I like violence." Quickly, Alex stepped forward and stood very close to the man's face. "If you're going to talk like that," he said gently, shaking his head, "or even think like that, I don't know how you're going to be able to stay up here at the top of these stairs." Instantly, the man stiffened and looked over his shoulder, nearly falling backward. Alex was between him and the monks, and the man was standing with his boot heels at the very edge of the top stair. Alex stepped back and the man turned around and hurried down the stairs. We did not see him again that day. The proceedings of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine were as much as an commensal service as a conference or a meeting. Beyond the elegant formalities of presentations, panels, and papers, there was a colorful ritual and ceremony. Because the native people's presence had been arranged at the 11th hour, their participation was prepared almost extemporaneously as events unfolded. Several native elders were placed on the program. John Firelame Deer was seated on a panel. He gave a lengthy presentation and answered questions from the audience. It was arranged that Grandfather David would offer a Hopi prayer and blessing, and Leonard Crowdog, who, if not an elder by virtue of age, was an elder by virtue of his lineage and leadership, would perform an opening role in Pierre Vilat's Cosmic Dance. In spite of what Spotted Fawn had said to me in Tucson about the cost of being so much on the road, she and Rolling Thunder had arrived with several of their people and had managed to provide not only for all of them, but also for Grandfather David as well. Rolling Thunder had seen to David's arrival and to his care, and he was concerned that David's presence and position be acknowledged. Well, I would do a prayer offering on behalf of our people, David responded when Rolling Thunder arranged a discussion with the appropriate persons. Yeah, I'd be willing to do that. I'd like to sit right on the ground like I do, not stand up on some stage like a speech or something. Well, just sit down and send the prayer in the right way. In the evening, when the time came for David's offering, he did sit down, right on the floor among the audience in front of his chair. He had to be helped. There was a blanket for him to sit on. His Hopi cornmeal, tobacco, pipe, and other objects from his bag were placed appropriately before him, and he was helped to light his pipe. Holding his sacred cornmeal, he gave his prayer in Hopi, and he did not interpret for himself, as I had seen him do in the past. As I watched and listened to Grandfather David give the prayer he had done countless times over the decades, I thought about how this old man, now well over 100 years old and totally blind, had been brought nearly dead to Rolling Thunder's Nevada home. More than a year had passed since then, and it had been an active year for David. I recalled Rolling Thunder telling me that if David could continue to be who he was supposed to be, he would recover. But that if people stopped listening to him, he would perish. Now people were listening, and it mattered neither to them nor to David whether they understood his Hopi language words. They understood David. That is the end of chapter 4. Nyawa for listening, my friends. We'll see you soon.